So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all the people connected today, and welcome to the GACERE-OECD webinar on circular economy and extended producer responsibility. My name is Daniele Serra, and I am the coordinator for the GACERE activities at UNIDO. And today I am speaking from Vienna on behalf of Nilgun Tash, Deputy Director of the Department of Environment at UNIDO, who is unfortunately unable to join us. Firstly, let me thank all those who contributed to the organization, including Nilgun. And special thanks go to OECD colleagues whose expertise in the EPR field is invaluable, and I hope will be helpful to all of you today. We are very grateful to all the panelists who accepted to share their experience, and of course to the attendees as well for their participation. Allow me to say a couple introductory words to today's webinar. I won't spend much time to describe the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency and its work, which I know you are very well aware of. I would just like to say that this is the first webinar GACERE is organizing. We hope the first of many. We aim it to be a tool for open discussion, peer-to-peer learning, and knowledge sharing. And as such, your interaction is very valuable, so it is also encouraged. Feel free to open the mic for questions or use the chat. And please consider that a specific space has been allocated at the end of each of the two main sessions to receive questions or comments. Insights from today's webinar will later be summarized in a GACERE working paper on circular economy and extended producer responsibility. Please also note that this event is being recorded. Now I would like to introduce the first session that I will facilitate and which will be dedicated to setting the scene of extended producer responsibility. So we will try to answer some of the questions like what is EPR and why does it make sense in the context of circular economy, how the perception of it changed in the last period, and what are the efforts undertaken by governments in this regard. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Peter Börkey, Circular Economy Team Leader at the OECD, to kindly take the floor. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniele, and thanks for getting my name right. I'm very impressed. And hello to everyone, of course. I'm just trying to share my screen. I hope you can see my first slide. So I'm Peter Börkey. I am the Circular Economy Lead in the OECD's Environment Directorate. And I will try to give you a bit of an introduction to extended producer responsibility in just about 20 minutes or so. And then my presentation will be followed by that from Ambrogio Miserocchi, who will be speaking just after me. And so let me just go to my first slide here. So, I think you must still be able to see my screen. And hopefully it's going to work now. Okay. Can you see that first slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes.
Very good. Sorry for that. So first of all, why are we talking about extended producer responsibility here? Let me just provide you with a little bit of context. In some recent work that we did in the framework of our Global Material Resources Outlook to 2060, we projected materials consumption to 2060 And as you can see here from the slide, we're projecting a very, very strong increase over the next 40 years. Most materials are essentially doubling, and particularly in Africa, which is strongly represented in what's called the rest of the world here on the slide. Some of the increases for non-metallic minerals and metals are even, a factor 4. And with this increased materials consumption comes an increase in municipal waste generation. These are numbers from the World Bank, Water Waste 2.0 recent reports, which shows that municipal waste is essentially going to double to 2050 here. Especially in low and middle income countries where the increases are actually factor 6 in low income countries and more than factor 2 in lower middle income countries. So that's a little bit the background and why, which maybe also explains why there is increasing attention going to extended producer responsibility. But what is extended producer responsibility? This is the OECD definition. So it is extended producer responsibility is a policy approach in which the producer's responsibility for a product is extended to the post-consumer stage of a product's life cycle. And there are essentially two objectives that are being pursued with this. First of all, to implement the polluter pays principle, and second, by putting responsibility on producers for the end of life, provide them with incentives to better design their products so that they can be more easily recycled or treated and at the end of life. And extended producer responsibility has been somewhat of a success story. Actually, last time we tried to take stock of extended producer responsibility systems around the world. That was in 2014, so these numbers are a little bit old. But what you can see is that there's been a strong increase essentially since the 1990s in the use of EPR. Almost, exponential growth for some parts of that period. And there were at the time almost 400 systems in place globally. It's very likely, and we know that this number has further increased. What we don't know is exactly about how much, because as I said, and as I think most of us know, EPR has been a big point of focus in the policy debate, not only in OECD countries, but also in many emerging market economies. We know that there are new systems in place in Chile and Colombia, in various states in the United States, and also in EU countries where EPR are being applied to new product groups. But going to the next slide, then, what's the focus of EPR systems? Again, this is from the stock take that we did back in 2014. So these numbers are likely slightly different, but probably not radically different today. So most EPR systems really focus on electronics. That's roughly 1/3 of those that we were able to find at the time. And then you have 18% that focus on tires and 17% on packaging. Vehicles and auto batteries coming as a fourth. So it's been very strongly focused around those product groups and waste streams. In terms of the regional distribution, what you can see is that most EPR systems are in use in Europe and in North America. The reason for the very large number in North America is that both Canada and the United States have EPR not at the federal level, but at state level or province level in the case of Canada, which of course multiplies the number of systems there. How does extended producer responsibility work? First of all, it's a system of funding. So essentially, producers usually delegate their responsibility for end-of-life management to some entity that is called a producer responsibility organization, which usually can be owned by producers themselves. Sometimes these are waste management companies. So producers pay a fee for every product that they put on the market to the producer responsibility organization, and the producer responsibility organization then organizes the end-of-life treatment, including the collection, including the sorting and the recycling. Of course, producer responsibility organizations are private entities. They can be for profit or not for profit, but they cannot operate effectively without some government oversight. So it's very important to remind here that EPR is not, like a private sector approach, but it requires, strong support through legislative frameworks, enforcement, monitoring from the governments in charge of the territory where the jurisdiction where the EPR applies. There are two different types of extended producer responsibility: financial and organizational extended producer responsibility. Both of them are being applied. I think there is a lot of financial EPR, particularly in the packaging area. So financial extended producer responsibility consists in PROs essentially responsible for collecting financial resources from producers that then are being used to support municipalities in their waste management duties, meaning funding the separate collection, funding the sorting that municipalities also carry out. So that's what you'll find in a lot of countries for packaging in particular. And then there is organizational EPR, where in fact the PROs are not just subcontracting the management of waste, but in fact directly responsible for the organization and the operational aspects of waste management. They can own collection networks and sorting centers. So these are two alternative ways. I think in the case of EPR for packaging, there are relatively few which are organizational. One example might be those in Germany. And there are also different models of EPR governance. I mean, this is just one of the governance dimensions, of course. But in some countries, you will find that there are multiple producer responsibility organizations which are competing for producers. That is, for instance, the case in Germany for the packaging EPR. Other countries, and I think they are more numerous, tend to have monopoly producer responsibility organization, which is in charge, and so which doesn't provide producers with a choice. There can be very good reasons not to have competing PROs, simply because of economies of scale that are usually there and that need to be achieved. And in some of the smaller countries, there might not be an economic rationale for multiple PROs. And finally, and this is somewhat of an outlier, there are not too many examples of it, there are also government-run systems where in fact producers pay into a state fund that is then administered and dispersed by the government. For instance, in China, the e-waste management, EPR, is a system of that sort. So what are the achievements that extended producer responsibility has been able to achieve? Here on this slide, you can see the evolution of municipal waste generation across OECD countries. I should say here, so this is mostly then focusing on the packaging EPRs, of course. What you can see is that there's a decoupling between municipal waste generation, which has remained nearly flat to 2018, while GDP has continued to increase. But maybe more importantly is what you can see on the right hand of this slide. So there's been a significant increase in the material recovery or recycling rate of municipal solid waste, which has increased from 25% at the begining of the millennium to 36% in 2017. I think we should actually update those numbers, but we have newer ones. But what you can see is that there has been an effect. This is, of course, not exclusively extended producer responsibility, but it's the effect of a policy package that also includes landfill taxes, recycling targets, and a number of other interventions, a lot of investment, of course, into infrastructure. But EPR, we believe, has played a pivotal role in achieving these results. EPR has also been very effective at generating significant amounts of funding to pay for separate collection and recycling. And therefore has led to an amount of burden shifting, shifting away some of the costs from municipal taxpayers and onto producers. So here are on the slide 2 examples. In Flanders, which is a region of Belgium, which roughly has 6 million inhabitants, EPR revenue has been around 200 million per year. Well, this is the 2018 number. In France, across all EPR systems, 1.4 billion in revenue has been generated. And most of that really has been transferred to municipalities where EPR is now contributing around 10% of waste management costs. So these are significant numbers and a serious amount of burden shifting that has taken place. But nothing can ever be perfect. And so that's also the case of extended producer responsibility. There are a number of issues which have been in the focus of critics of extended producer responsibility. One that you can see here on the slide is the well, a question about the cost effectiveness of EPR systems. So you can see here on the slide the the outcomes that have been achieved by different by EPRs for different product groups in the EU, and the average producer fees that are being levied. And as you can see, there's a broad diversity here in the results, both in terms of the outcomes and the costs. And so there's been a lot of criticism that some EPR systems are very relatively cost ineffective, and there is there is pressure on some EPR systems to improve their performance there. Of course, some of those differences that you can see here, particularly in the costs, are also linked to a different scope that EPR systems have in terms of the products that they cover, different quality and level of service that they imply. Some EPR systems have door-to-door collection, some other EPR systems have a bring system, which of course is much cheaper. So these numbers are not directly comparable, but this is to illustrate one of the criticisms that has been formulated towards EPR. Another issue has been concerns about how the introduction of EPR systems is actually impacting competition. And what you can see here on the slide are the different markets where competition is potentially being impacted by EPR. So of course you have the product market itself, you have the market of producer responsibility organization services, and you have the collection, sorting and treatment markets, which can be impacted. There have been, and of course these markets are of different size. So, particularly distortions in the product market will have a very large impact potentially on consumers. And so EPR systems have frequently been challenged by competition authorities, particularly in the EU. And competition authorities have demanded changes to the setup of EPR systems to fix some of those problems. I won't go in much more depth here. And finally, and this will be of particular interest to some of the audience today, EPR systems have also been criticized for sometimes interfering with the livelihoods of informal waste pickers. Of course, in a lot of poorer countries, there are sometimes large numbers of waste pickers that derive their livelihoods from separating and picking waste up. So when there's a failure to include informal sector operators, this can undermine EPR systems. So for the sake of time, I move us to the end of this presentation. I just want maybe to point to the fact that we have developed some guidance that was updated back in 2016, so not very long ago, and that provides a detailed set of guidance across virtually all of the issues that surround extended producer responsibility. There are lots of good practices and principles in there, and there's a particular focus in this volume on various issues around governance, competition, also design for environment. We'll hear more about that when we discuss modulation of fees, or EPR fees. And there's also focus on the informal sector here in the publication. Maybe to finish, I want to just look ahead very briefly. So while there's already a lot of knowledge, of course, available for the implementation of extended producer responsibility, particularly in the areas where we have lots of experience. So this will be e-waste, this will be packaging, this will be tires. There's also there are also new issues arising almost constantly, and new challenges that are appearing because there are discussions about significantly expanding the use of EPR, not just discussions, also concrete actions, of course, into new product groups such as textiles, pharmaceuticals. There are also expansions of EPR to cover additional environmental objectives, such as addressing littering, addressing microplastics. And there are new market dynamics that are challenging existing EPRs, such as online sales, which is basically providing opportunities for free riding that weren't there before. And we published recently a report on this. We also looked into the role of EPR in supporting management of end-of-life pharmaceuticals. So this is what you see here on the slide. But so this is, it's a constantly ongoing debate. And we at the OECD are trying to keep at the cutting edge and developing new reports as we speak on some of these issues. I hope this has been a helpful introduction, and so I hand it back to you, Daniele. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and for introducing EPR so effectively. So now I would like to move to a second speaker, Ambrogio Miserocchi, who is a Senior Policy Officer at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So as you all know, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is an institution for circular economy. And it is also, by the way, a strategic partner of GACERE. Last year, they published a position paper on EPR, which they define as, and I'm quoting, a necessary part of the solution to packaging waste and pollution. So, Ambro, thank you for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniele, and thank you very much for the introduction. That I will skip it then, because you had the perfect words for it. And you already mentioned the title of our publication, which is a necessary part of the solution to packaging waste and pollution. So before starting, I would like to stress out the fact that it's part of the solution. And so while going through the presentation today, which I hope Dragana will be able to share, I will really try to frame the concept of EPR in the bigger picture of the circular economy for packaging. So to put it into perspective for as much as I can. This said, thank you very much for inviting me today, for having me as one of the speakers. And also thanks to Peter for the extremely useful presentation as always. It's always hard to be the speaker after you because you have too many details and your knowledge is really comprehensive when it comes to EPR. So I will really try to add something to what was already shared with a focus on packaging and plastic packaging in particular. So Dragana, we can skip this slide because I think that Daniele already made the perfect introduction for the foundation. So the foundation really works in shifting from a linear consumption model toward a circular economy model. And one of the flagship initiatives within the foundation is the plastic initiative, which builds on a 6-point vision for a circular economy for plastic packaging. So again, the focus is on plastic, but many elements hold true also for other packaging types. So these 6 points really addresses what we think we would need to see in a circular economy for plastic packaging. So the first one is the elimination of problematic or unnecessary packaging items. The second one is that we need to shift towards reuse models where relevant, reducing the need for single-use packaging. And then the target to achieve 100% reusability, recyclability, or compostability not just by design, but also in practice and at scale, meaning that theory is not enough. We need to see results on the ground. And then the fifth point looks at decoupling the consumption of plastics, but in general packaging material, from the consumption of finite resources. And then the last point, which is not less important than the others, is that all packaging is free from hazardous chemicals and that the health, safety, and rights of all people involved are respected. Now, out of these 6 points, we developed 3 actions that are in the coming slide. And these 3 actions are really needed to achieve this vision. So Dragana, if you can go to the next one. Sorry. And these 3 actions are really moving from the vision to the implementation. And this is what we have developed with our network. So our network is made of governments, businesses, academia. And we developed these 3 key actions that are not too far from a waste hierarchy perspective. If you want to see, elimination could be very easily connected to prevention, and then circulation could be easily connected to recycling. But elimination means that we need to eliminate in the first place all problematic and unnecessary items. Innovations means that we need to ensure that all items we need are reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And then finally, we need to circulate materials so that they are kept out of the environment and in the economy for as long as possible. So today's system is almost entirely based on single-use business models when it comes to packaging. And as Peter said, there is a very strong projected growth rates of material consumption in the coming years. So improving material circulation, including recycling, is necessary, and we should absolutely continue doing so. But alone, that will not solve the problem. And if we are to transition to a circular economy, we really need to put our efforts beyond circulation and behind elimination and innovation towards new ideas. So next slide, please. This means that we need to go well beyond downstream waste management challenges only, and we need to look upstream. By upstream today, I mean everything that happens before the user. So what is normally referred to as midstream or the central part of the value chain. And upstream means tackling the root causes of the problem, and it means designing out waste when designing products. It means maintaining value of materials in the economy for as long as possible, and it means preventing the problem before it even becomes a problem. And that means preventing waste from being created in the first place, so avoiding waste. And this is why, to transition toward the circular economy, we do need a much more comprehensive approach that goes beyond rethinking packaging itself, looking at recycling only. So next, there is this framework that we put together to really see that in order to transition, we do not just have to focus on packaging in itself, because packaging is part of a bigger problem, which is about rethinking the business model, so how we deliver products to users. And it's also about rethinking products. So what do users get? And if we rethink the 3 items together, then we can really scale the problem and address circular economy in all its potential. This said, if we go to the next slide, material circulation will still play a critical role in the years to come, because where we cannot eliminate packaging, or where we cannot innovate packaging that we still have to circulate packaging material, we need something else. We need to circulate them. And the problem is that economics don't work. So there is a problem in recycling economics that at the moment clearly don't work. So there is a net cost that we need to cover. So, sorry, still to the previous one. Nope. This is the last slide.
Excuse me, I have
No
troubles with. I need to. Okay.
No problem. But this said, really, as I said, material circulation will still play a critical role in the years to come. So we need to make it work. And where packaging items cannot be eliminated, as I said, or cannot be innovated, we need to close a net cost. So there is a cost gap that we really need to address. And this cost can be addressed only if we are able to provide dedicated, ongoing, and sufficient funding. And this funding will be necessary to cover the net cost of fixed recycling economics. And without it, it's extremely unlikely that packaging collection and recycling will scale to the extent required. Now you can go to the next slide, thanks. And as I said, so this funding, what do I mean by dedicated, ongoing, and sufficient? And I am getting to EPR here. So dedicated means that funding should be ring-fenced to ensure it is dedicated to a clearly defined scope of activities. Ongoing means that funding should be guaranteed on an ongoing basis, as opposed to a one-off investment or an investment limited in time. And sufficient means that funding should be guaranteed to be sufficient to execute the defined scope of activities and should be able to evolve in line with the actual net costs of establishing and operating the system required to deliver on the objectives that were set. So this is why we decided to make the publication that Daniele mentioned at the beginning, that was endorsed by more than 150 organizations. I can post in the chat the link to the publication, so I will not go through all the details. But really, we wanted to bring along as many stakeholders as possible, because if you move to the next slide, we looked into the alternatives to EPR. And we are not just talking about EPR in general. According to the OECD definition, we go to a specific EPR, which is mandatory fee-based EPR, which is the only proven way to secure dedicated, ongoing, and sufficient funding to fix recycling economics. And this is by analyzing public funding, voluntary funding, and then, of course, extended mandatory fee-based extended producer responsibility schemes. And if we compare all of them, we see that the only one that is able to provide funding in that way is actually mandatory fee-based extended producer responsibility. So if we move to the next slide, we made a quick analysis. And of course, as Peter said, EPR is widely considered to be an effective tool for the after-use management of packaging. And this means driving up collection, sorting, and recycling rates. But what we wanted to see was really how effective they are compared to the alternatives when it comes to plastic recycling rate. And in the graph, you can see that we have put together countries with no EPR, countries with limited or voluntary EPR schemes, and then countries with mandatory EPR schemes. And of course, from the chart, you can see that there are differences among the countries with those mechanisms. But we can see that the average for mandatory EPR schemes is extremely high, with also very high recycling rates in a few geographies. And of course, going back to what Peter said, there are many challenges. There are a lot of lessons learned that needs to be considered. But in general, what we see is that EPR is really pushing the reduction of waste disposal, increasing collection recycling rates, is growing, is making recycling market for recycled materials stronger, and raising significant funding, as Peter mentioned in the two examples in the previous presentation. In the next slide, I also want to say that while I've been focusing on the circulation part of things, and that's where EPR would primarily play a role, EPR can be more than just a funding mechanism and can go beyond this role it can play in the circulation part of it. It can incentivize upstream solution. It can help building more efficient system. It increases transparency of financial and material flows, and also grow awareness, not just among consumers, but also about producers on what type of packaging they can place on the market. So I will stop on this slide. This is my last slide. As I said, EPR is the only proven way to provide dedicated, ongoing, and sufficient funding. It has proven to be an effective mechanism to drive up collection and recycling rate. It can be more than just a funding mechanism. And this, for me, is extremely important because the experience we see so far with EPR is not showing the full potential of EPR. So we can really go beyond what we have seen through EPR schemes. But at the same time, it cannot be considered as a silver bullet, and more effort is needed to shift away from a single-use consumption model towards a circular economy. So Daniele, I hand over back to you. I'm happy to take any questions if there's any, or just hand it over back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambro, and thank you for your insightful presentation and for making the case for EPR with concrete data. But also thank you for stimulating the reflection on the essential role of preventing and rethinking I think this is crucial for transitioning to a circular economy, and I think it should inform all initiatives in this regard. So with that, I would say that the first session has come to an end. So I will leave the floor to Peter again, who will facilitate the next two sessions. And thank you very much for your intervention so far, and for facilitating the next two sessions.
Thank you, Daniele. And so, yeah, I think we're running slightly behind time. So my suggestion is that we move directly into the next presentations. We will, in this session, discuss, some of the basics of extended producer responsibility. How do you get started? And to do so, we first hear from Angelina Schreiner from Prevent Waste Alliance, which is well, I think Angelina will tell us. I don't need to say very much, but so they have developed an EPR toolbox, which is particularly directed towards places that are just beginning to implement EPR. And from there, we'll move into two practical cases. We'll have my dear friend Kgauta Mokoena, who will talk about the efforts undertaken in South Africa. And following that, we'll have Arese, Lucia, Onaghise, and sorry for massacring your name, probably. I should have asked you while I had a chance how to pronounce it, who will be talking about some initiatives that the Food and Beverage Recycling Alliance in Nigeria has undertaken. So maybe let me pass the word directly to you, Angelina, for your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for the kind introduction, and also to you, Peter and Ambrogio, for the great introduction into the topic of EPR, but also on circular economy in general. And like Peter said, I'd like to present to you the Prevent Waste Alliance activities on EPR today. And thank you so much, Diana, for sharing my presentation. Next slide, please. So first of all, what is the Prevent Waste Alliance? It is a platform for exchange and international cooperation, and well, organizations from the private sector, academia, civil society, and public institutions jointly engage for a circular economy together. And it was launched by the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and in 2019, and has already more than 300 member organizations. So there are different groups and a wide range of stakeholders represented within Prevent. For example, from the private sector, CRIBE from Ghana, Plastics Europe, Nestle, or the Wuppertal Institute and Academia Group, civil society, there's WWF, IUCN, Öko Institute, but also public institutions like German ministries, just to mention a few examples. And it is financed by BMZ, and members contribute with voluntary in-kind contributions by a variety of circular economy experts. Yeah, so you can say that Prevent Waste Alliance combines all crucial stakeholders along the value chain. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how do we work? We share our knowledge. That's like the core activity around the topic of circular economy, and two material streams are in the focus, plastics and electronic waste. And we are also discussing a new working group on preventing food waste. And there's a third working group on framework conditions that covers topics such as capacity development and municipal waste management. And of course, we connect perspectives as the group is quite diverse. and act in international cross-sectoral partnerships. The Prevent Hub can be used by all members to connect among each other, share their products, events, or look for partners, for example, for projects. And in the matchmaking series, members and partners can present a product, a study, a challenge, or a solutions to other interested members. And there's always like a lively discussion afterwards. Besides that, we incubate and pilot scalable circular economy solutions worldwide. So currently we have 8 pilot projects worldwide on the topics of plastics, e-waste, and capacity building and organic waste management. And furthermore, the Innovate and Prevent supports the development of innovative solutions for waste prevention, as we heard, the most important part of our work. Yeah, and finally, we also contribute to shaping guidelines and standards for circular economy solutions. Among others, studies on plastic prevention was published, and of course, our EPR toolbox that I will present today in more detail. Next slide, please. And you can also skip that one. Thank you. Yeah, so on EPR, discussions arose already in 2019 with the launch of the Prevent Waste Alliance. And it was noted that there's both like a high interest in the topic, and the topic is gaining importance, both at national and international level. And at the same time, a lot of questions arise regarding the topic among interested stakeholders. So therefore, already at the very beginning of Prevent, the need for knowledge exchange was considered as a key target to support low and middle income countries in their efforts to establish EPR systems. And therefore, Prevent Waste Alliance developed the EPR toolbox that serves as training material for interested stakeholders who want to learn about the different aspects of EPR. And the target groups are, of course, practitioners and policymakers in low and middle income countries, public institutions, technical staff and advisors, for example, but also the private sector and the academia. Next slide, please. Yeah, so how did we go about? For us, it was really important to create a toolbox with extensive knowledge and know-how, but it should be at the same time be general enough to be applied in different country contexts. So therefore, we included different stakeholders in the development process of the toolbox. First, materials were drafted by consulting experts, and then actually working meetings in Ghana and Indonesia took place. And here different stakeholders talked about EPR and what would be important for them to know from their country perspective. And also feedback from different stakeholders in Indonesia and Ghana was gathered afterwards, and also, of course, feedback from different Prevent members. And finally, a consolidating workshop with Prevent members took place before the toolbox was finalized. Next slide, please. So the EPR toolbox consists of 3 thematic modules. The first one is general aspects of EPR, the second one on packaging waste collection and sorting, and the third one on packaging waste recycling. And so there are 14 fact sheets in total, and additional fact sheet is currently developed. And additionally, there are also 5 country reports from Chile, Germany, Republic of Korea, South Africa, and Tunisia, and also a set of questions and answers. And while the PDF is interactive, which makes it extremely user-friendly. And additionally, there's also training material, including exercises and role plays for each fact sheet and presentations. Other than that, we have also published a video series called EPR Explained last year. The series contains interviews with experts in the field of waste management, recycling, and also EPR, obviously. And they share key principles, but also give examples of their personal experience, for example, when establishing an EPR system. And the training material are exclusively accessible for Prevent members, but all other documents, including the interactive PDF, is freely available on the Prevent website, and I can also share the link in the chat. Next slide, please. So yeah, like I said, the EPR toolbox is rather of a general nature. So for concrete action on project level, further implementation is necessary, and that's already done in different projects. So different projects, for example, from my GIZ colleagues, work with the EPR toolbox in the countries that are interested, of course. For example, in Southeast Asia, my colleagues have provided translations for Vietnam and Thailand, and for Indonesia, translations are ongoing. Also, workshops and webinars and trainings were carried out. And for Vietnam, for example, also packaging policy brief and a handbook was developed. Furthermore, translations in Spanish are ongoing because we see a lot of requests from Latin America for these materials too. And also other organizations use the toolbox for trainings or workshops. For example, it is used by some consumer goods companies for internal trainings. And besides, WWF has elaborated a massive open online course on EPR based on our Prevent toolbox. Next slide, please. Yeah, so further developments, as we are all aware of, and like Peter has elaborated on at the beginning of this webinar, EPR is gaining more and more recognition, and for instance, also through the negotiations on the UN Treaty on plastic pollutions, but of course also through the EPR position paper published by MacArthur Foundation that Ambrogio has mentioned. And many countries are planning to set up EPR mechanisms, and we notice a high interest in the EPR toolbox. However, we also notice the need for further action and support, such as dissemination of knowledge, even more broader and also more in-depth, for example, through trainers. And of course, it's also necessary to keep the basic materials up to date. For instance, country reports need to be updated with new developments ongoing, for example, recently in South Africa. Also, Prevent regularly receives requests from governments, private sector, and other practitioners, for example, for technical support from EPR experts and practical exchange and sparring with other implementers, for example. And there are also often requests for even more case studies. So we provided 5, but I mean, each country is different, and it's important to learn from others, best practices, and of course also lessons from failures. Next slide, and this is my last one. So yeah, all the requests and well, the needs have brought us to develop some ideas on how to continue. And we are currently also in discussions with UNEP, OECD, the MacArthur Foundation, and WWF on how to collaborate on this topic, how to share knowledge, and certainly how to make good use of our resources, capacities, and networks. And so here on the slide, you can see an idea from Prevent side and yeah, what could be offered to meet the demand. So of course, we have these guiding documents available, the toolbox, the massive open online course by WWF, the position paper. And then we think it would be good to establish an expert pool that could serve as a help desk for specific requests and also accompany countries in setting up EPR. And of course, also to disseminate expertise through trained trainers. And of course, peer-to-peer learning is also often requested. So we feel that there's a need of a network of practitioners. Also, experience from GIZ projects could be shared. and matchmaking could be carried out to connect stakeholders, for example, stakeholders who are at the same level of introducing EPR schemes or who have overcome a similar challenge in the past. Furthermore, we certainly see that there's a need for some space for innovation so that the discussions not solely focus on waste management, but go even further, like also Ambrogio mentioned before, for example, by covering upstream measures. We see also there's a certain need for clarifying what cities can do and also what role a global EPR system could play. And we are, of course, very happy and open to collaborate on these tasks. And yeah, that's it from my side. I sincerely thank the organizers for organizing this interesting webinar and for inviting Prevent Waste Alliance. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelina, for a very informative presentation. And I can only encourage everyone to have a look at the toolbox because it's really very, very well done. And it's a very practical and useful guide, plus all the supporting elements that Angelina also mentioned. Maybe let me see if there are any questions maybe at this stage directly to Angelina from the audience. And I give you a few seconds to think about whether you want to raise your hand, which you can do in the reactions button, I believe. If not, let's move to the next speaker. So Kgauta Mokoena, he's the Chief Director of Waste Management at the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries in South Africa. And he's going to tell us about what's going on the EPR front in South Africa and how they got started on this. So Kgauta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the introduction as well as the invitation to be part of this webinar. We have gone through the EPR establishment process in South Africa, so I'll be sharing what we went through. I'm hoping that the slides are there. Can you see them, Chair? I can share from this side.
Yes, we can see the slides, and they're now also in full screen mode. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just as an outline, we have the introduction principles, the EPR schemes introduced in 2020, discussion, as well as the way forward in the interest of time, Chair. As an introduction and background, the Department of Forest, Fisheries and Environment published the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations in 2020 on the 5th of November through the government gazetting process. These are in line with the National Environmental Management Waste Act, Act number 59 of 2008. The Waste Act is a specific environmental management act. We call it a SEMA for our national framework legislation, which is the National Environmental Management Act, Act number 107 of 1998. We also have the National Waste Management Strategy 2020 that came into effect in 2021. This provides us with a policy as well as legislative framework that we had to take into account when we were introducing EPR in South Africa. the National Waste Management Strategy 2020 has the circular economy as one of the key principles, where in it we look at circular economy as a systematic shift from a linear economy, the take, make, and dispose approach. We say not to that, but yes to a circular approach that keeps material as long as possible in the value chain before they become waste. The definition in the National Waste Management Strategy for alignment with other structures as well as circular economy initiatives, we use the MacArthur Foundation definition, which looks at circular economy as a restorative as well as regenerative economy by design that aims at keeping products as long as possible in the value chain, and hence the different spheres on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand side corner, largely indicating the many opportunities that are there, from facilities that can do the waste recycling, facilities that can produce the waste, factories that can manufacture the different products before they even get into the value chain. Transitioning to circular economy, we're looking at the reuse of materials, keeping the materials in the value chain as long as possible in the loop, to conclude the sphere as well as the circularity. But also is priority because of the economic transition as well as job creation potential that is there, seeing that we also recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic situation. So hence the economic recovery as a result of circular economy as well as EPR implementation is quite key. Continuing with the principles, but also looking at, again, opportunities as well as initiatives emanating from the famous butterfly diagram, also from the MacArthur Foundation, to say on the left-hand side, we have initiatives that are biological materials in nature that we supporting through small, medium, and micro enterprise support initiatives, as well as the involvement of the informal sector, including household, because some of the initiatives on the green left-hand side are happening at household level because of low tech in some of the cases. But there are advantages that they lead to less waste being disposed eventually to landfill sites at the bottom of the diagram. On the right-hand side, also the technical materials, we have initiatives that we are supporting that are aimed at promoting the contribution of small, medium, and micro enterprises in the circular economy and their participation in the EPR scheme. So hence, on annual basis, we issue a call for bids or proposals to enterprises to submit their proposals for funding that we avail to enable the participation of enterprises in the waste recycling, circular economy, as well as EPR implementation. And these also lead to waste diversion or more diversion and less landfilling eventually. In 2020, taking account the existing policy framework, Minister gazetted the notices for implementation of EPR in the e-waste space, which is for electrical as well as electronic equipment, paper and packaging for paper and packaging industry sector, where there is already strong participation from private sector on informal basis. So hence the paper and packaging EPR notice was formalizing the EPR in the paper and packaging space, already including all types of products from glass, metal, paper, plastic, depending on the type of material. Even though for plastic, we have also another dispensation on the plastic carrier bag and flat carrier bags for a levy as well as determination of a threshold in terms of manufacturing of that type of a bag, and eventually making it less waste that can be disposed of at the landfill site or anywhere through littering. Lighting is one of the 3 EPR schemes. We have structured slightly different from other destinations where you find e-waste including lighting. So we have a separate lighting EPR that is under implementation in South Africa. So the current arrangement and mechanisms on EPR presents flexible options and options for PROs or for producers to get into a particular product responsibility organization of their own, of their choice, or starting their own EPR scheme. Also, there is a requirement for publishing the fee, determination of the fee jointly by members of an EPR scheme together with the PRO, where the PRO is a preferred option. Otherwise, other producers go a separate route where they implement their scheme on their own. Sometimes it is a deposit refund system in nature or approach. And also there's still individual EPR schemes that are voluntarily taking place apart from these 3 that I've mentioned, which is paper and packaging, waste and lighting. But just to talk to another 3 that has been published for public comment is batteries, pesticides, as well as waste oils. This will add to the 3 that I've spoken to earlier on. This is with an intention of formalizing EPR schemes and increasing EPR scheme as well as EPR implementation gradually for the different waste streams that are prioritized. Our legislation allows minister to prioritize certain waste streams for determination of a management approach for those different waste streams that have been prioritized. Recycling initiatives are quite key in the process and also a stepping stone towards EPR. Working with informal sector and private sector, we have waste collection mechanisms, either formally through municipalities or cleanup campaigns that will happen on a regular basis. But once material has been collected, something needs to be done about those. The National Waste Management Strategy 2011 introduced the notion of 3 Rs, the waste hierarchy, hence the reuse, recycle, as well as reduction of waste from those types of activities that are taking place or that would have taken place from waste collection. But also the 2020 National Waste Management Strategy introduced circular economy in the policy space, and hence a need for a policy mechanism for EPR that included the regulations as well as notices. Producers and producer responsibility organizations registration kickstarted immediately after the introduction of the regulation. They were introduced in 2020 November, but the implementation date was extended to May 2021. So hence from May 2021, we started getting registration by producers as well as producer responsibility organization. For successful implementation of EPR and circular economy, the following are some of the key aspects that needs to be looked at. Initiatives for circular economy, such as in waste, recycling, or any other space that you can look at are quite important. Planning for implementation of EPR is important so that it fits in within your infrastructure, it fits in within your policy mechanism, as well as other systems that are in place. Benchmarking also quite important. You need to see what other destinations are doing. For instance, we had technical tours to different destinations when we started in BRICS, for instance, to countries such as India, Brazil, but to Europe as well. Recently, engagements with Norway from the EU and other countries that has best practice in circular economy. And of late, our engagements in the Africa region, for instance, with the likes of Nigeria and Rwanda on their EPR implementation. Legislation as a basis for EPR is quite key. And in most of these destinations I've mentioned, legislation is used as a basis for EPR. Consultation with stakeholders is very important, because this way you can get your informal sector, SMMEs, private sector participation, guidelines to be put in place. The toolkits that were mentioned earlier on are quite important. We have from our waste economy, Pakisa in 2017 introduced the need for the packaging guidelines as part of the toolkits and the guiding for labeling for recyclability, so that customers can see and identify products that are environmentally friendly and has element of circularity with ease. Regular monitoring and evaluation, very important, because from there you can do continuous improvements where necessary and adjustments depending on what you are picking up when you do monitoring and evaluation. Partnerships with other stakeholders are quite key. As I've mentioned, some of our initiatives and activities are as a result of the partnerships we have and engagements we have with the likes of the World Economic Forum, UNEP, UNEDO, JEF, the OECD, the African Development Bank, African Circular Economy Alliance, GACERE, just to mention a few. But in conclusion, Chair, it's safe to indicate that there is no single one way to get started in implementing extended producer responsibility, but it will vary from one area to another and one condition to the next, and from circumstances to circumstances. With those, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kgauta, for that very interesting overview. Let me ask if there are any questions in the audience directly to you after this presentation. Maybe if not, let me ask one question, Kgauta. So you were mentioning that you're currently in the process of registering producers, if I understand correctly. So do you have an overview already of the coverage of those registrations, the share of the markets that you're covering, and when do you think the EPR, the 3 EPR systems that you're implementing will effectively be operating and be sort of operating at scale?
Thanks a lot, Peter, for that input questions. On registration, it started on the 5th November, May 2021. The regulations provided a period of 6 months to the 5th of November 2021. After that, the regulations provided for, that was for existing producers and producer responsibility organizations. But after that, the regulations do provide for registration of new producers and new producer responsibility organizations that get established after that registration period. So from there, the 5th of November 2021, the implementation started. So the implementation started by the producers as well as producer responsibility organizations. The reporting that I've alluded to earlier on is required in terms of interim reports, which is a 6 months report. It was supposed to be January to June, but because of the November, December last year, we have an odd first interim report, which is 8 months report as opposed to 6 months report, just for the first 5 years. Going into the future, it will be 6 months and 6 months, 6 months and annual report. Annual report will be at the end of a calendar year. So we are using the calendar year for the reporting period based on implementation. So in terms of coverage, we pretty much have most of the producers as well as producer responsibility organizations and hence ready to go. And also we excited and looking forward to the first interim reports that are due this month or will be for end of June, which we'll be receiving in July. So it's quite an interesting period, largely because we are starting in the formal EPR schemes. Otherwise, you would have the voluntary ones that are still operating as long as their waste streams hasn't been prioritized and notices gazetted for the EPR in those waste streams. But quite an interesting one and very good responses in terms of the registration as well as implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thanks a lot for your support and partnership. The partnership that I alluded to earlier on include the interactions with the OECD through people like yourself, among others, and to all other organizations who have been part of the work on circular economy, such as the CITRA, as well as the benchmarking of the region-to-region work, such as the African Circular Economy Alliance with the Latin America and Circular Economy Coalition, which has been quite useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those additional explanations. And I'm quite conscious that we're running behind time. So let's move right away to our next speaker, Arese Lucia Onaghise. She's the Executive Secretary of the Food and Beverage Recycling Alliance in Nigeria. Floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the kind introduction. And I also want to thank the GACERE and OECD for inviting me to speak at this very important and critical discussion. I'm very happy to be here. I'm here representing the Food and Beverage Recycling Alliance, which is based in Nigeria. And based on the agenda, I'll just quickly go through my slides. First, an introduction and background of what FBRA is about, the current members, the EPR activities we're having, and the performance results to date, partnerships, and after that, we'll take questions. I'll also like to quickly refer to what Peter spoke about in his introduction when he spoke about packaging being 17% of the waste generated in Europe. In Nigeria, the packaging sector accounts for about 85%. And therefore, the Food and Beverage Recycling Alliance focuses on the packaging aspects and sector. So just a bit of background, the Alliance was set up in 2018 in March, so it's a little bit over 4 years. At that time, 2 other PROs were set up. And so in Nigeria, based on the industry-led model, we have 3 PROs that are existing. And the Producer Responsibility Organization for the food and beverage sector is the FBRA. and to set up to enhance the waste management operations focused on post-consumer packaging material in Nigeria. And then we're regulated by the regulatory authority called NESDRA in Nigeria. And so we have compliance reports and we have oversight from that regulator. Just a glance of the membership. When we started in 2018, 4 multinationals came together: Coca-Cola, Nigerian Breweries, 7-Up, and Nestle came together to start up the alliance at that time. And it was set up and registered in Nigeria as a non-for-profit, limited by guarantee. Therefore, all the funding we get to run the PRO is based on the contributions made by the producers. So we can see that we've moved from 2018 to 2022. Currently, as at today, we have 24 members of the alliance, and these are the brands that their logos are here. The second thing about it is, at that time when we started, based on the kind of packaging material the 4 founding members had, the focus was on rigid plastic, mostly PET material. But as we began to diversify into other types of other food and beverage sector players, we also had a diverse type of packaging material. So we also started working on other types of packaging material, like the used beverage carton, which are like Tetra Pak or beverage containers. We also do the glass, and we also do the flexible plastics. The alliance is based on 3 strategic pillars, and the 3 pillars are, if you see these 3 circles we have on my slide, the major one, which is the green one, is to enable collection, recovery, and recycling, which is our major focus. We also have policy drive engagement and thought leadership, and we have public awareness campaigns, education and advocacy, because in Africa, we also know the need to plug that gap in terms of awareness creation. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to use a lot of pictures to emphasize what we've done in terms of the activities. So for collection and recovery, we have different means of collection. We have receptacles that will place and partner with different entities, either the state, the school, the communities. And at the time when we started in 2018, we started with 1 collection partner. As of today, we have over 10 collection partners across Nigeria that we're working with to ensure that they can collect the different types of packaging material, and then we fund them and support their activities. In terms of policy drive, we have engaged with different entities in terms of policy, discussions, and dialogue. We have engaged with the Federal Consumer Rights, which is in charge of consumer protection, because we also have identified the importance of consumers being brought up to speed about what we're doing in terms of circular economy. We have also partnered with different states, waste management authorities, some international development partners that we have also partnered with. We also have different entities where we have had different, like this was a challenge for innovation for the youths. We also have speaking engagements where we go and speak on create awareness. And currently this year we had the Women's Day where we partnered with the other PROs to promote awareness in terms of EPR and recycling. For advocacy, community awareness, we go to schools, because we know that it is critical for students to understand at that stage what we're talking about in terms of circular economy, in terms of packaging, in terms of integrated waste management. We also recently sponsored for the World Environment Day, a university challenge where there was an essay writing. Other pictures shows our engagement in terms of teaching and going to the dump sites for the informal sector to train them on safe work practices, health and safety procedures, and also how to empower them in terms of doing their work. We have also provided different receptacles. This is for the informal sector where we provide bags for them for collection. And also these bins, I don't know if you can see my slide, the bins that was donated to school are indoor bins that are made from recycled Tetra Pak material from the used beverage cartons. And so we donate it back to schools, and then we create awareness and tell the children and teach them that this is what their recycled material can be used for. Other community engagement programs we've had is to go to different communities. So far, we've gone to over 50 communities where we create awareness. We also identify an indigenous collection partner so that when we leave that community, the program continues to be sustainable over time, and then the collection continues. So what's our results and performance to date? I tried to use this diagram to have an indication of what we've done to date. And the biggest circle here gives the total recyclables we have recovered in the period of 4 years, which is over 22,000 metric tons. We have also been able to collect the rigid plastic, which is mostly PET material, the used beverage cartons, the flexibles, and recently we started collecting glass. So how do we intend to close the loop in terms of our mandate, in terms of collection? We are using different means to close the loop. We have collection centers like the one, the picture that is here. We also have recycling bins that we send to schools, public spaces, and markets and open places. And in terms of the policy, what have we achieved in terms of policy? We worked with the Standard Organization of Nigeria to establish and develop the RPET standard for food grade application. That has also been able to create an opportunity and a market for investors to come in. And currently in Nigeria, we have one set up RPET facility, and we have others that are coming up on board. Another thing we've done is we've worked with the federal and the state Ministry of Environment to develop policies that can be implementable. And then finally, with NESRA, what we're doing with NESRA, there's a guideline on EPR already established in 2014. The guideline states that it is mandatory for all food and beverage sector players to join the alliance. However, we have just 24 members, and we know that we have more than 24 companies in Nigeria in the food and beverage sector. So what we're also trying to do, on the 5th of July this year, we're going to have a stakeholders engagement. NESRA has invited all the stakeholders in the food and beverage sector so that we can have an engagement and discuss why they're not members. We also present what we're doing and also get them to join the alliance. And afterwards, they can effectively enforce that all food and beverage sector players will join the alliance. In the last 4 years, when we have been established and we have worked with different sector players in the value chain, we have also identified gaps in the sector in terms of improving the collection and also facilitating recycling. And one of the gaps we have identified, the high cost of logistics. We have also identified that infrastructure is inadequate. So based on that, we're also setting up collection centers like this. This is one of the ones we have set up in Delta State, and we're working with an operation partner. Based on your presentation you had, Peter, earlier, we're working on the financial EPR model where we work with partners. We don't own we own the facility, but we work with partners to operate on our behalf. And the second one is we're having a major project where we're going to set up an aggregation center within Lagos in the free trade zone. And activities are started in terms of pre-construction activities to ensure that we can set up that infrastructure. We have also identified a project with the informal sector. At the time we had our first engagement with them, they were not registered. Now they're getting registered. We want to see how can we work with the informal sector to include them in the EPR. And then having that facility, the informal sector can come directly to the facility and they can also bring in their recyclables. One thing I don't want to leave out in this presentation is our key partnership and collaborations. So over the last 4 years, we have been able to partner with the Federal Ministry of Environment. We have engagements with them in terms of the policy. We have also worked with World Bank, IFC. We are currently working with them and supporting them on their Pro Blue project. With UNIDO, we were part of the committee for the National Study on Packaging and Recycling Innovation, Alternative to Packaging, with the Japanese government and the Federal Ministry of Environment. And afterwards, they've also partnered with us on the upcoming project that they're starting just about now. With GIZ, we have had several engagements, workshops with them to see how to partner. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the Federal Consumer Rights Protection, because we also have a national awareness program that goes across all the states to ensure that we can project the awareness and create education for not only producers, but also consumers. And of course, we're working with Standard Organization of Nigeria for the RPET standard How do we implement it? How do we get the entities set up for RPET facilities? And how do we get producers to also be able to put back a percentage content back into their production so that we can actually close the loop in terms of the beverage recycling? So finally, in conclusion, I just want to say that in the last 4 years, we have had a couple of activities we have done in being able to support the collection or recovery for recycling of over 20,000 metric tons is just a tip of the iceberg. We still have a lot of work to do. That is still less than 5% of what is put in the market. So we're looking at other further collaborations and partnerships on how we can drive it. And one of the things we also crave for is to leverage on already existing partnerships, already existing PROs, already existing EPRO models or systems in other clients. And that's how we like to get engaged in such discussions where we can learn from. I've actually learned a lot and taken a lot of tips from today's webinar so far. And I hope to learn a lot so that we can improve the system in Nigeria and also move from a linear economy to a circular economy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And we're unfortunately, I have loads of questions that I would like to ask you, but as we are severely running behind time, let me propose that what we'll do is we will take questions at the very end of this webinar and see, if there are questions at the end. But for the moment, let me thank you there. Close this this part of the webinar and move us straight into the next session, which is focusing on extended producer responsibility fee modulation. So as you would have gathered from some of the previous presentations, the impact that extended producer responsibility has had on efforts or creating incentives for producers to better design their products has been the weak spot of EPR so far. So there have been efforts to develop additional incentives, and this is what we will be hearing about in this session. We first hear from my colleague Frithjof Laubinger, who will present a paper that we published recently. And then we will hear two practical cases from Portugal and Italy. So I will make proper introductions a little bit later, but Fritz, the floor is yours for your presentation at this stage, and you have 10 minutes. What I forgot to say, if possible, I would like us to just run 15 minutes longer than what we had planned so that we can still take questions at the end of this webinar. So I hope this will be feasible for all of you here in the call. Okay, but
thank you for proposing it, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. And yeah, I mean, you've done a pretty good introduction already. Here at the OECD, we have done some work on advanced modulation of EPR fees. And even though I'm not going to present the full paper to you, I'm inviting to download the paper if you're more interested in this topic where we have a more larger discussion. And here I'm just providing you with a more, with just rather an introduction to the topic of advanced EPR fee modulation. So let me just, here we go. Right, so as Peter said already, extended producer responsibility has three main objectives. And the first two are really to shift the financial burden of waste management from municipalities to producers. And then with that, also to support waste management in increasing recycling rates and material recovery. But extended producer responsibility has also another objective, and that is to aim to incentivize design for environments. So to instigate that products are designed in a more sustainable way that reduce environmental impacts at the end of life, but also throughout its life cycle. So whilst EPR has been successful in fulfilling the first two goals, there's less evidence so far that extended producer responsibility has also effectively led to better incentives for design for environment and for sustainable design of products. So what is EPR fee modulation? I mean, as Peter said, most extended producer responsibility schemes are implemented in a collective implementation. So that means that producers collaborate and pay an EPR fee to a producer responsibility organization that is then responsible for either collecting the money and transferring it to a public sector that manages the waste, or also to organize the waste management treatment itself. And basically, fee modulation is really about how this EPR fee between the producers that is paid to the PRO is structured. And traditionally, EPR fees were modulated in rather basic fee criteria. So they were based on just the material type or the weight, or just on a per unit cost of a certain product. And this rather basic fee modulation has limited incentives for producers to change the design. So if you have a weight-based fee, you can have some incentives to reduce the waste and the overall mass of the material that is used in the product. But beyond that, there's relatively limited incentives to really change product designs that then also improve recyclability at the end of life. So advanced fee modulation is really the approach to aim and incorporate a more advanced set of criteria in the EPR fees that are based on a more detailed measurable product characteristics, and that better determine a product's impact at the end of life to better instigate design for environment. So one thing that's important to note here is that this is really something that is for EPR that is implemented in a collective implementation. There can also be EPR tools that are implemented as individual producer responsibility, where producers are just directly responsible for the end-of-life management of their products, and then also more directly pay for the end-of-life management of their products. And there's a more direct also incentive for those producers to also change the design. But in collective implementation, advanced fee modulation would be the approach to better incentivize product designs. So there's different criteria that can be used for modulating EPR phase in a more sophisticated way. And those can target different impacts at different stages of the life cycle. So there can be criteria that can be used and that are really focused on the end of life phase and focused on improving impacts at the end of life of products. So for instance, to incentivize improved recyclability, designs for improved recyclability, to increase recycling rates, to incentivize presence of hazardous substances, or to also phase out and design out hazardous substances. To increase consumer awareness, such as to implement, include labels on a product design. But there can also be some criteria that more target externalities across the whole life cycle. So also criteria that can instigate recycled content, or that just overall improve the use phase performance of a product through product lifespan aspects, such as, for instance, improving durability, repairability, or reusability of a certain product. So when modulating EPR fees in a more advanced way, there are some issues and considerations that arise with those, and those are discussed in more detail in the paper. And I'm not going into every single of those issues here, but I think there's two things that are important to point out. And one, which is relatively intuitive, is that when designing EPR fees in a more advanced way, it adds complexity to the whole system and for all stakeholders that are involved. So for instance, for authorities, it requires more capacity for enforcement to avoid free riding. For producers, it requires also more for capacity for compliance. And that is especially the case when EPR fees are modulated differently across different markets, and the producer is producing for different markets, but those EPR fees are not harmonized across those markets. So there's really some increased cost compliance there. But also more overall, more costs arise for implementation of the EPR policy tool, as well as for reporting and monitoring as the EPR tool is ongoing. Besides added complexity, there's also some products that may suit themselves better for fee modulation than others. And that then really depends on the ratio of the EPR fee to the product price. So where you have a EPR fee that is relatively large compared to the product price or the product value, modulating that fee will also lead to a more effective and larger incentive for design changes. Whereas when you have a ratio where the EPR fee is relatively small compared to the product price. So for instance, in non-durable products such as packaging, the EPR fee has a relatively high value compared to the product value. But in durable products such as electronic equipment or electronics in general, the EPR fee is relatively small compared to the product, and modulating that fee may lead to less effective incentives than for non-durable products. So with that, I just want to provide you some brief policy insights for advanced fee modulation when implementing new EPR schemes. So as I've said, and advanced fee modulation adds complexity to the whole system. And mature EPR schemes are more likely to have capacity to implement this additional and to navigate this additional complexity. Therefore, it is advisable that when countries implement new EPR schemes, to first start with a relatively basic fee modulation that is just based on certain quantities or based on weight of different materials, in order to keep the complexity of initial implementation low for authorities, but also for other stakeholders involved. Advanced fee modulation can then still be implemented at a later stage to then also better incorporate design for environment incentives. Again, as I've also said, non-durable products may lend themselves better to advanced fee modulation, and that is due to the differences in the fee to product price ratio. So the EPR fee has a relatively larger share compared to the product price than in durable products, but also due to market structures, because non-durable products tend to be more produced for local markets, whereas electronics, for instance, are produced for global markets. So there's a greater need for harmonization of EPR fees there. Finally, advanced fee modulation is only one tool in a larger policy mix to encourage resource efficiency and design for environment. So advanced fee modulation is not the only way to incentivize sustainable product designs, but other policy tools can also be used as complement or also as alternatives. For instance, regulatory approaches such as product standards, recycled content requirements, green public procurement, but also taxation of certain unwanted environmental impacts and externalities. So with that, I just thank you. And here are also the links to the two publications, the EPR updated guidance, as well as our paper on modulated fees, where you can receive more information about these.
Thank you very much, Fritz, for outlining the concept behind fee modulation and highlighting some of the challenges and issues that are connected to its introduction. So from here, I propose we move directly into the two practical cases So first we have Elga Almeida, who's a team manager at Ponto Verde in Portugal. And she will tell us about how they are implementing fee modulation in their system. So Elga, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter. I would like to thank for the invitation to SPV to talk about this important issue as modulation and concretely eco-modulation. I don't know if we can start my presentation from there.
Dragana, do you have the PowerPoint? Okay, sorry.
Yes,
Okay,
I'm doing it right away.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see it?
Yes. Can you pass next one already? Thank you. So I would like to make a quick overview of the Portuguese system, then talk about a little bit of the eco-modulation in Portugal and how it should be. Next slide. Well, the next one. Yeah. For a quick presentation. So just a quick overview of the Portuguese system. We are a not-for-profit industry-owned packaging recovery organization. We have 100% of population coverage and 100% territorial coverage. It means that includes the islands of Madeira and Açores. We are currently now on our third license. We are on a competition management model that ended, well, not ended, our third license ended last year, and now we are on an extension of the third license for this year, and probably next year we are going to have the fourth license. So next slide, please. We are on a competition model. Just to say that SPV has 25 years of experience, and only on the 5 last years we have a competition. And this is an important issue related to the eco-modulation. That's why I would like to talk to you a little bit more about this topic. Well, in terms of action, collection and sorting is assigned by law to the municipalities, both for raw waste as well as for selective collection. Our legal framework has always allowed competition, but it was not the case for 20 years, only just the 5 last years, as I told you before. So approximately 95% of SPV costs are defined by the government in terms of the payment to the municipality operators, communication campaigns, and also for R&D. These topics are, these costs are defined by our government. So, and we also have financial support of the regulating body that oversees the integrated system for packaging. It acts just like a clearinghouse and loads the assignment and compensation. Plus, we are financial, well, basically, we are not a total financial system, we are a system, a financial system, but we don't have operation. We have a part of the operation like the call for tenders, the definition of the recycling operators is our charge, but we are not on the field in practice. Next slide, please. So the competition, we started just with one entity. It was on 2017. And since 2018, we are three pros. I think that we are the only country in Europe with competition for financial not for profit pro. Now, I'm not quite sure in this time, but I'm quite sure that we are the only one. Well, it just doesn't make any sense, but it's our reality. Well, we sell the materials for the recycling industry, and we keep the income, and we support the recycling when necessary. For example, on the plastics mixed fraction, we have to pay for the recycling. So we guarantee the take back of materials with recycling gate fee, and we ease the burden on producers, of course. Collection in charge of pro is possible, but it must be authorized by the municipal partners, and waste collected needs to be unloaded at the local municipal operated if sorting is required. We have to manage all the packaging waste fractions from all the sorting stations according to the market share. And after 5 years of competition, we retain over 80% of the market share. So all of these, to say, next slide, please. All of this is necessary to explain a little bit how the eco-modulation in Portugal works. It was introduced only by SPV. Our competition until now didn't do it. We did it in 2019, and we did it by an increase of 10% of the green dot fee for 3 specific kinds of packaging that are disruptive of recycling. It means that we are talking about these 3 examples are PET bottles with aluminum cap, glass bottles with ceramic that stays on the packaging cap, and PET bottles with PVC label. So these are the 3 examples that are the green dot fee is higher than the normal green dot fee for this packaging. So we have here a lot of questions. We don't have time to talk about all of this, but we have why only a malus and not a bonus? Why not extend the list of examples or the penalty percentage? Could it be differently? Sure, it could be done differently, but we are on a competition plan, and it limits a lot the kinds of actions of modulation that we can do it. Next slide, please. How it should be in practice. Next slide. So we have, when we are on a competition model, we have to have several points that have to be taken on account. We have to have clear legal and regulatory framework adapt to national situation. Competition should promote a market-oriented self-regulation, but it requires a strong independent oversight and consistent enforceable regulation, and is a paramount. In case of packaging waste management, packaging is not without coordination issues, and the margin to compete in the Portuguese case, it's minute. Prices dynamics, it's higher. There are also risks such as cherry picking of producers, of imbalances between markets, as well as cross-subsidization between materials and between different waste flows. monitoring performance more difficult and expensive. And these considerations are very important when we have to take decisions about modulation. Next slide, please. And I think it's the last one. So eco-modulation, and we can't forget that eco-modulation is the differentiation of green dot fees for a given packaging in terms of bonus of penalty according to the environmental profile of the packaging solution and its recyclability, at least in Portugal. And should not be a competitive differential factor. Should be seen as an environment protection tool in order to have better packaging. Should be equal to all pro in the same country, and not only in the same country but at a national level at least, and have the same absolute value. It should not be a percentage plus or minus. Focus on malus as the advantage of not jeopardizing the financial balance between the pros. We are on a competition model. When establishing criteria, focus should be on collection, sorting, and recycling disruptors. The main target is to have better packaging for recycling. The income from malus can be distributed as a bonus to producers. And the harmonization is not only important on a national level, it's also relevant at an international level for companies present in different UA member states or all over the world, and avoid barriers to trade. Imagine, for example, Coca-Cola or Nestle with, for each country, different kind of modulation. It doesn't make sense. Applying eco-modulation criteria should be based on a reliable and auditable information, also to make sure that is fair for the producers. Well, a lot to say about this topic. Unfortunately, we don't have time for it. So thank you very much again. And I'm obviously available for any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elga, for putting quite a lot of very interesting material into your short presentation. And I agree. I mean, we would need way more time to give
talk about it.
The attention that this topic needs. But unfortunately, we don't have that. But I think what it shows, and this is really meant, of course, as an introduction to EPR for policymakers in places which are just beginning the implementation or thinking of the beginning of implementation of EPR. I think what you showed very nicely is how EPR fee modulation to some extent collides with the objective of introducing competition, and how that also restrains the opportunity to implement fee modulation properly. So thank you very much for that. And then without further ado, let's move to our last speaker. So our last speaker is Amanda Fuso Nerini. Amanda, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Peter.
You are the head of international relations at CONAI, which is a PRO in Italy. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks also, Davide, to invite me in this webinar. I was participating and contribute a lot in the job done by OECD, drafting the EPR guidance and EPR guidance on fee modulation. So I hope to avoid to repeat something that maybe the colleagues can find in your report. So let me share the screen and go straight to CONAI system. Are you seeing the presentation now? is on the desk, you see?
Yes, but it's
Okay.
not in the presentation.
I'm moving now into full screen. Just confirm me that you see into full screen now. Is it in full screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you too. So just few words about CONAI. If someone of you are not in confident with our system, we are, first of all, we are a EPR scheme for Italy on a not-for-profit basis. So, and CONAI is an umbrella organization where CONAI is the financial part, so financial responsibility, and the operational part, that's in our case start after the separate collection. So it's for sorting and recycling activity. It's done by our material consortia, so packaging material consortia, one for each type of material. And it's the activity, of course, is overseen by CONAI. Just to mention our latest key strategy to improve the system was to have a new material consortia for compostable plastic packaging, which is BioRepack, just started last year. Then the system is complemented by three self-compliance, so three producer not collective organization, and Aliplast and CONAI are focusing on plastic commercial industrial waste, namely Aliplast for stretch film, like LTBA, and CONAI for crates and pallet. Where CORIPET is the collective system, PRO for PET bottles. So within this EPR scheme, CONAI is responsible for achieving the recycling target of all packaging placed on the market. So we have to be responsible also for the work done by the independent system, so the autonomous system, that have to report to us the data and show evidence of what they had done over there on packaging. So within CONAI, we have as a members more than 750,000 obliged company among packaging producer and packaging fillers. And as of course, as extended producer organization, we are a member of EXPRA and founder of GACERE, and that is our extended producer responsibility alliance at not only a European level, but a worldwide level. So we have fulfilling all the general minimum requirement provided by the new Waste Framework Directive, and we have already achieved our targets. Fee modulation, exactly what told before the colleagues of OECD. We started in '97 from the using the fee for as economic levy for design for environments, and the scope was on the beginning to work on the packaging material efficient use of resource. So it means optimization of packaging. So that's why the fee was based on per type of material and per weight. Then in 2012, we introduced the reusability criteria. So the reusable packaging that are inside a verified and controlled loop are reduced fee according of the rotation, number of the rotation and the lifespan. In 2018, we started introducing the recyclability criteria, and the last improvement we done after the EPR library and study and paper you done, we work on fine-tuning the methodology to how set our criteria according to the recyclability requirement. So we start with a life cycle assessment approach to define the different level, and now the criteria is totally moved to the full net cost coverage. So we are able to allocate a real cost at the net cost of the revenue of the material of which we are owner after the sorting, and then we sell on the market. So the full revenue from selling the material on the market are deducted from the fee. So according to that, now we are we start in 2008 with a plastic fee, and we have now 5 levels. So level 1, A1, A2, B1, and B2, and level C. And you can see that exactly one of the effect of a net cost approach that since 1st July, due to the increasing price of the secondary materials from plastic stream, we was able to reduce the fee from 104 euro per ton until 600 euro per ton in case of level A1. So that means packaging of coming from commercial industrial stream. And this second more relevant change was on level B2, where we have the, for example, the PET bottle that are now have a reduced fee from 149 until 20 euro per ton. So this, what was the learn lesson to improve, because this tool, this elements of our strategy was to work on cons. So the pro are the design for recycling, and that will help us also to achieve the target, was to work on the cons. The con was that to avoid shifting of material use and shifting between material and to other material because of the fee magnitudo. So and maybe affect the recyclability of other material that was full recyclable before the review of the design of the package. So that's why we start to have the same approach of fee modulation for paper, and by introducing level of fee according the net cost principle, and the level are defined according the fiber-based percentage content. So level 1 is the paper packaging that is achieving 95% of percentage of paperboard. Below level 1, you have the paper packaging with less and more or less fiber rates continents. And we are as improving again of the tool of this economic levying and for design for recycle will be also in the case of bioplastics. There is in the project to also introduce modulation of among bioplastics compostable packaging. So
Amanda,
yes.
Can I ask you to maybe wrap up in the next 2 minutes?
Yes, of course. I don't. This was just for your proceeding to have in your hand something more for the attendance when you will distribute the slides. This is to give you the results, because we can also prove results. So results on reusable that was increased a lot thanks to this fee moderation tools. This is the process. That process believe into a strong stakeholder engagement over the time with all our members and also external stakeholder. The fee in supported us to achieve the target. So right now we have achieved the new target that has been set up for EPR up to 25 and 2030. And just to give you a flash on the recent study that maybe we can share with you and maybe have an additional momentum for explanation on the screening the efficiency of packaging EPRs in Europe. We make this study with the Bocconi University, showing that we have different PRO model. CONAI is efficient and effective, looking into the outcome of the study. And this is why we see that harmonization of modulation, fee modulation can be very difficult because the systems are different, but there are a few points that can be reached. One is to stick on the criteria. The second is to keep the metric, so always euro per ton. Third is to the methodology, so the criteria is to reflect the real cost of recycling for one-way and for non-refillable pack, and go and works on transparency, because especially where you have competition, it's not the case of Portugal where there are all no profit, but in the case of for-profit PRO, it is necessary to split member fee from service fee, where service fee can be modulated. So thank you. This was my last slides, and open to any question you will have.
Thank you, Amanda, and apologies for pressing you a little bit there. I really wanted us to fit into, the extended time frame that I set, but I think we've been too ambitious in this webinar. EPR is such a rich topic, and we'd probably need another.
Exactly, we can have another event. Yes. On this topic, yes.
We'll discuss that with UNIDO colleagues and see what we can do. So I really have to apologize to everyone here on the call for not managing to have time for discussion, but I certainly want to hand it over to Elisa Tonda, who's going to wrap us up for some final remarks. Elisa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks to each and every one of the speakers and the moderators of today's session. As Daniela was alluding to at the beginning, it's a bit of a first experience also for GACERE, the Global Alliance on a Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, as we are entering into the depth of the conversation on different options and different solutions to advance a just transition to circular economy and resource efficiency. And the members of the Global Alliance had expressed a lot of interest towards extended producer responsibility. So as you rightly alluded, Peter and Amanda, this can be an appetizer to the conversation. So we have started to bring both the foundation, the basics, and some experience of different level of maturity, complexity, different targets, target products. So that's definitely an opening conversation to raise the interest of GACERE membership, and we really hope that these have been meeting their expectations as well. And I'll just add a couple of reflections also from our standpoint. The discussion on extended producer responsibility comes to in our view, at a very, very interesting point in time, where there is a growing recognition on the potentials and opportunities associated with extended producer responsibility. Just a few months back this year, at the beginning of March, at the UN Environment Assembly, member states gathered, and one of the items on their agenda was a conversation that transformed into a resolution on enhancing circular economy as a contribution to achieve sustainable consumption and production. And in that context, they clearly highlighted that different policies, legal and regulatory framework can be particularly effective in advancing circular economy and extended producer responsibility in the context of this resolution, and this discussion was clearly highlighted as one of the important opportunities on which they wanted to deepen their efforts as well as their understanding. So we see these also as a good opportunity to link back and to connect to a request that we have heard loud and clear from member states. Some of the participants in the sessions have also alluded to the connections that they have with UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, on this agenda, and having been part of conversations that would help us bring our experience together. And as we have been doing today, learning from the successes, but also learning from your recommendations of which pathway might not be the most effective one, or where the challenges are. From the first presentation of Peter, we clearly highlighted that we still have some elements on which we need to discuss more in order to take full advantage of the opportunity of extended producer responsibility. So we would definitely welcome the opportunity of reconvening and working with this group to really deepen our understanding. Not only we see another landing spot, which in our mind would be particularly interesting. As you know, during this year, the process of negotiation of an international instrument, an international legally binding instrument to address plastic pollution, is going to start. A preparatory meeting for that process of negotiation took place a few weeks ago. And again, as you alluded to in a lot of your presentation, there are quite solid experience and also the presentation in our last sessions have started to allude to successes and results that would be interesting to bring into that conversation, so that policymakers and negotiators have a sense of the opportunities that these tools, these approaches, and these solutions are bringing forward. So I'm not going to take more time. I know I've been extending well beyond the time we had dedicated. I'm just going to conclude by giving a big thank also to all the team in OECD and in the GACERE support team that have made this very interesting session possible. And I wish all of you a very nice continuation of the day, and thank you. And I'm sure we will check with the speakers if we can make available some of the material that they used for the presentation, because I'm sure everybody will be particularly interested in being able to analyze that more in detail. Again, thanks to everybody, and again, congratulations to all the speakers and moderator for the extremely interesting session.
Thank you, Elisa. I would also like to join in thanking OECD, and thank you all of you for being part of this insightful event. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.